welcome back to the Shreve Crump and Low YouTube channel. We're here today bringing you another Collector to Collector. I'm here with Mr. Bart Newland, a longtime friend and watch collector in the local Boston area. Bart, you've been collecting now for about 2 decades.
Yes, the better part of 2 decades, and it's a fabulous hobby and enabled me to make great friends, such as with you.
That's right. And in front of us on the table here, we have a number of your pieces that are currently in your collection. You have a very well-rounded collection, and one of the first questions, Bart, what was the origin story of your collecting? What was your first watch?
Yeah, my first watch was my bar mitzvah watch, and I got to pick it out, and I think I had pretty good taste even at the time. We're talking the very early 1970s, and my family didn't have a lot of money, so it ended up being a Wittenauer watch. But even by today's standards, this kind of 70s vibe is pretty cool, at least to me. Unfortunately, this is not my actual bar mitzvah watch. That got lost in a mishap one summer when I was in grad school. But with diligent searching, many, many years, and an automated eBay search, I actually found another one.
It's a great story. Yeah, beautiful watch, integrated stainless steel, sort of sport watch of the era. What year would this be, Bart?
1972.
1972. And what would this have cost in 1972?
It must have been, $200 maybe. I don't see my parents spending much more than that.
For an automatic watch?
For an automatic watch, yeah.
Yeah, with a day in the date, no less.
Yes.
And a very sort of retro 1970s dial.
Yeah, I think it's kind of timeless. It holds up today.
It's a very cool piece. Bart, so we have about 22 watches here, all in total, including the beautiful watch on your wrist. How many watches is too many watches in a collection?
I think my initial answer is this is probably too many, but I think anybody who enjoys this hobby knows how that happens. Mm-hmm. And one of the great things about this hobby is the breadth of the spectrum is just so enormous that there are so many directions you can go in and so many pieces that you can fit in. It gets really hard to limit your interest. And while this is a big number, I do sell things from time to time, and that opens the aperture to something new. Mm-hmm. And you also learn over time that you can be really interested in something and you don't have to own it. And I think that comes with a certain level of maturity.
And discipline.
And discipline, both. So, and I think that's one of the keys to success, is realizing this is really interesting, but I don't have to own it.
Can you talk a little bit about the watch on your wrist?
Yes, this is actually the most recent piece to enter my collection. It's the 2023 Cartier Tank Normale on the bracelet, and a great sales associate at our local Cartier boutique put in the word for me and made it happen. It's one of 100. And frankly, that's part of the interest of this piece. Mm-hmm. It's scarcity. And the other thing that really interests me about this piece is I really see right now kind of a return to the smaller gold wristwatch, maybe of the 60s and 70s. We were talking earlier, Piaget has reintroduced the original Polo, mm-hmm. and I think this is the gold wristwatch, the gold dress watch is coming back.
I think so too.
On the bracelet, they made it in yellow gold and platinum.
Okay.
100 each. And and to me, it's a piece of jewelry. The watch really integrates with the bracelet, and I think it's pretty stunning.
So Bart, when you're collecting, some collectors look at buying and acquiring new pieces with a certain philosophy. Do you have a philosophy that you have in mind when you're looking to add pieces to your collection, when you're looking to exit pieces from your collection?
Yeah, for me, it's really been more of a journey than a solid philosophy. My interests have changed over the years, and I think pieces that get added to the collection have just followed those interests. Mm-hmm. And we were just talking about, the smaller gold dress watch with a 70s vibe. That's a new interest. I became very interested in sector dials, and one piece, the Messina Labs, turned into a second piece, the Omega CK.
Mm-hmm. Great watch.
That turned into, Patek does some really nice sector dials. And they do a Calatrava, the 5296, and they do an annual calendar moon 5396. So that was just, gee, I love sector dials, and it turned into, a piece of the collection. So
nice.
the basic philosophy is, follow my interests, and as my interests change, the collection changes with it.
Okay. You mentioned a little bit earlier off camera, what watches drew you originally into the hobby, over 2 decades ago. You mentioned Pairings.
Yeah, I really started with Pairings simply because I didn't own any watches, and as most of us do, we go online and start to research, and I found Pairings watches, and I liked the design, simple, easy to read. But then I found this Pairings community online, and that really resonated with me. There's the watch, but then there's all these people that are passionate about the watch and passionate about other things, and a sense of community. And that's really what kind of drew me in. And I quickly learned that there was a small group of Pairings enthusiasts right here in Boston, and we would do get-togethers every few months. And sure enough, that really, fueled my interest in watches generally, because you're getting together with 4, 5, 6 other people that share that passion.
So you don't have any Pairings in your current collection?
Yeah, so that's kind of, maybe typical or classic. I've kind of, over time, moved away from my interest in Pairings and, sold those to make room for other things. Would I acquire one again? Sure, why not? But I think that's just, the ebbs and flows of a collection over time.
Right. So as any seasoned watch collector, at some point in their collecting journey, they have an encounter with Rolex. What has been your experience with Rolex, and what type of part has it played in your collection? Because you do have a couple Rolexes here on the table.
Yeah, and my Rolex Kermit is probably other than my bar mitzvah watch, this is the longest termed watch in my collection. This is from 2007. Mm-hmm. And, I think early on in one's interest in wristwatches, Rolex obviously represents, a certain point of luxury. Early on, they're way too expensive. How could I possibly spend that much money?
Right.
And as many of us know,
little do they know.
Right. We become acclimated to the cost, and I acquired some Rolexes, and then I think I went through this middle phase of my interest, and I decided, well, Rolex isn't really high horology. I like finished movements and complications. And so I sold some Rolex pieces to make room for other things. And then I think maybe the right answer, and maybe the most mature answer, is, but Rolex does things so well. And absolutely there's a spot for Rolex in a watch collection.
Of course.
They just, the things they do so well. And yeah, they make more watches than anybody, but they know what they're doing.
Got to respect the creme.
Absolutely. They really do know what they're doing.
They do. So you have the Kermit here, and you also have, do you want to show us the Pepsi, the Meteorite?
And I have the Meteorite Pepsi. This watch I purchased, even I can't get this watch, from an authorized dealer. So this was purchased from a local well-known watch reseller. Mm-hmm. And actually what I did is I traded about 4 other pieces towards this, pieces that I wasn't wearing that much. And that was a conscious decision. Here are some pieces I'm not wearing, but I think I would really like this one. And it was a good decision for me.
Yeah, I've found that, this is, been by far one of the most popular modern Pepsis. But what's unique about these dials is the cut of Meteorite is so varying from model to model. Right.
Each one is unique, they tell us.
Yep. Exactly.
And then, another example, just the Datejust. I never really got the Datejust, and I always thought, what's special about a Datejust? It's kind of a boring watch. And I bought one, and it was my daily wear for quite a while, and it's like, oh, now I get it. And back to what we were saying before about Rolex. It's really perfect. For what it is, Rolex really has made this, it's just a perfect piece. And like I said, now I kind of get the Datejust. And there's obviously a reason that they've sold so many million Datejusts over 60 years or so.
It's such a refined watch. I mean, you have decades of consistent brand DNA and very subtle changes to the design of every Rolex, pretty much. They are so careful with how they prune the design of the brand that the outcome is just an extremely elegant and refined piece of Swiss machinery.
And sure enough, it's not boring at all. It's a great piece.
So my next question is one of my favorite questions to ask collectors.
I'm ready.
Especially ones who have many watches in their collection. If you had to choose one watch out of your collection, off of the table here, what would that be?
Yeah, maybe that's the toughest question you're going to ask me all day. It would be really hard to resist the Richard Mille 6701, just because I love everything about it, and it fits me, and it's really the me Richard Mille.
Home run watch. Home run.
It totally is. If I had to pick one to be like my daily wearer forever, and the only watch that was my daily wearer, would probably be my Aquanaut Travel Time 5164. It's, again, just a perfect piece. And I was fortunate enough to walk into Wempe on Fifth Avenue in about 2016 and say, hey, do you have anything by Patek for sale? And the gentleman who's still there, and we still have a relationship, said, I think this just came in today. And I turned to my wife and said, should I be spending this much money on a watch? And her only question was, well, could you sell it if you want to? I said, yeah, I'm sure I can. So I acquired it at MSRP in 2016, and it's obviously still here in the collection.
That's a great story.
Look, I have to do a shout out to Qasim at Wempe at Fifth Avenue. He assured me this was a good piece to own, and I saw him last probably about 6 or 7 months ago, and we reunited, and I assured him I still owned the piece that he was happy about.
He appreciated that, I'm sure.
Yep, and he moved from a very junior sales associate to now being the Patek buyer for Wempe, and yeah, he's a great guy.
He is a great guy, I know Qasim.
He still tells the story that this was the last Patek Philippe watch that anybody walked in cold off the street and left with, because right after that, the interest really picked up.
Yeah, that was right at that time when things absolutely got white hot, especially for
stainless steel Patek sports watches.
But also for the Aquanaut models. Previous to that, Nautiluses were always relatively untouchable, but then the Aquanaut models as well, being in steel. This reference is a great piece in steel, and obviously you have the added functionality of the GMT.
Yeah, and it's a really great complication. The way they do the second time zone indicator with that skeleton hour hand, it's really clever.
It's a nice touch.
And I think that's something that really kind of draws me to that watch. It's just a little different way to do that complication.
In today's watch world, no one needs any of these watches to keep track of time. We have mobile phones, a lot of people wear iWatches. I personally have never owned an iWatch, but I can understand the allure of it, having everything right there on your wrist. Do you view watches and their functionality as, a utilitarian use? Do you view them as pieces of art, or maybe a little bit of both?
Yeah, I would say definitely not utilitarian. I don't think I've ever been in a situation, even tool watches. I've been diving with my Submariner, but I had a dive computer. I dove with the Submariner simply because it was fun to do, and I went diving with one of my Panerais. It was just fun to do. I'd say I view watches sometimes as pure jewelry, and I think this piece is pretty representational of that. This is a piece of jewelry that happens to be a watch. I really admire the engineering aspect of watches, and then I also view them as iconic of, industrial design and craftsmanship, and to see how that has changed over the decades from 1971 with this Zenith to something much more modern, whether it's a Journe or an AP.
Absolutely gorgeous original Zenith from the year
from 1971
with the original ladder.
with the original Gay Frere ladder bracelet. Yeah, I love this piece. It arose simply because I thought a vintage chronograph is a great addition to a collection. And 4-digit Rolex Daytonas are pretty darn expensive. And hey, the El Primero movement was in a lot of Rolex Daytonas.
It was good enough for Rolex for many years.
Absolutely.
Right?
And again, talked about 1970s design of my bar mitzvah watch. This is kind of classic 1970s design, and it's timeless.
Doesn't get more classic.
And it's a beautiful example.
And of course, you know, Zenith today produces a modern version of this as well, which is pretty darn spot on.
Yeah, and kudos to them for going back to that and recognizing in their portfolio, here is a design of value, let's revisit it. I think that's a mistake a lot of companies make. You know, somebody new is in charge of design and they ignore the historic portfolio and are just thinking, well, what can I do that's new? Where certain things they did over the decades, you know, hit on all cylinders. So please do go back and revisit. Cartier and, you know, Piaget stole my thunder. I thought it would be a great idea for Piaget to re-release the original Polo, and sure enough, today I read online that they've indeed done that.
They have. They released a new Polo 79, and they did it in just a very refined and modernized way. You know, the original watch is much smaller than this piece that just came out. This is larger. It has very functional link removal, whereas the originals generally, they were all fixed links, and they were quartz.
Yeah.
And we have a beautiful ultra-thin micro rotor automatic movement in the new 79.
With that 70s aesthetic.
With that 70s aesthetic.
Yeah, so good. Yeah, good for them for resurrecting it.
Yeah, I think so as well. Bart, has watch collecting taught you anything?
I think it's been a bit of a discovery process, and it's taught me the joy of kind of finding one's own style, and that applies to watches, it applies to clothing and fashion generally. And one of the nice things it's taught me is that, you know, no matter what your station in life, there are other watch collectors that just love talking watches. And that to me is a big part of my interest in this hobby, obsession, call it what you will. So really it's the people connections that I've made and the realization that, again, whatever your station in life, you can enjoy this hobby.
And of course now, I mean, we've known one another for the better part of the past decade.
Right.
But of course now, you know, we're both part of the local escapement watch group.
And that's a prime example. You can have somebody with one Rolex Explorer or somebody with innumerable pieces, and if you're together for the joy of the hobby and for just the joy of being together, then it all works out.
Yeah, that's right. So again, Bart, you've had about 2 decades worth of collecting watches under your belt. You know, what words of wisdom do you have for new collectors out there, you know, who are just getting into the hobby, whether young or old?
Yeah, I'd say to start with, be patient. It takes a long time to really understand what you like. And there can be a certain, adrenaline or serotonin hit of making a purchase. And I'd say my advice is to, again, be patient, take your time, enjoy the process, enjoy the journey as much as, you know, the destination. And to remember, it is a process. You'll buy some pieces that perhaps a week, a month, a year, 5 years later, you're not as interested anymore. That's okay. You know, conversely, if you're too patient, you may miss out on something. And then 5 years later say, why didn't I walk out of Wimpy with that piece? You know, you never know. So I think you have to cut yourself some slack and say there will be some mistakes made over the years. Maybe you'll make money on your mistake, maybe you'll lose money on your mistake, but to enjoy the journey and to enjoy the discovery of, you know, your tastes are.
So the age-old adage, buy what you love, is something that you adhere to when you're collecting.
Yeah, I really do try to do that. But even following that age-old adage, sometimes we buy things that we think we love and over the course of time realize that I didn't love it quite as much as I thought I would.
Do you have a watch that is like your Moby Dick watch, your white whale that has eluded you, that maybe you had the opportunity to acquire, but it slipped through your fingers?
Not so much, simply because other than something maybe super, super rare, everything is available if you can, write the check. And frankly, the mere ability to write the check is one of the least interesting things to me about this hobby. So I think for me, it will be, I expect I will learn about something, whether it's vintage or some new release, that will really pique my interest. And then the question is, great, it's piqued my interest, can I acquire it?
So the research aspect drives you more than the chase or the hunt for that rare piece.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time, as do a lot of us, online reading about pieces, and there's so many great resources, especially about vintage, and that's a great thing about the vintage part of the hobby, is it can consume many hours of thought without actually kind of chasing a piece.
Right. Is there a particular vintage genre of watches that you're driven to?
The vintage chronographs remain really interesting to me, so that Zenith is certainly one. There are a lot of Valjoux 72 based chronographs that vary in cost to acquire so widely, from 4-digit Rolexes to Movados that are probably not that much money. So, but you have to really be educated. You can make a lot of mistakes. I think the good news is on some of them you're not making a big financial mistake, but I can't repair these myself. So
right.
You kind of have to be careful.
Right. True.
And maybe it's just more fun to read about and learn about than to actually.
Right. And that's another point that you made earlier, which is having the discipline to tell yourself, okay, that is a great watch, but I don't need to own it.
Absolutely. That, I've really tried to have that wash over me. And whether it's watches or artwork or clothing, I think I can appreciate the artistic qualities of something and say, what a great something or other.
Great design.
What a great design, but I don't need to own it. I mean, there's a lot of clothing I can see at Dior. What a great design. I can't possibly wear that. It's either, styled for really skinny guys that I'm not.
Okay, I feel targeted there.
or younger.
Sure.
But I can appreciate it for what it is.
So obviously you're a very stylish guy, Bart.
I try, and I have a little bit of help at home, as you know.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Your lovely wife.
Marie absolutely, subs in as my stylist.
That's right. And she has a wonderful watch collection of her own, right?
And she does. And, and frankly, I'm really fortunate. We share that interest. She has an engineering background before she switched over to biology, and she really appreciates mechanical things. And, when I met her, she was wearing a black Casio. And I bought her a couple of nice but quartz watches over time. And pretty soon, the switch flipped, and she's like, I want mechanical watches.
It always helps when your spouse or partner is supportive of your addiction.
Yeah, and she's certainly supportive, and and she loves wearing fine timepieces as well, and more than once has worn either the Aquanaut that she bought from you a number of years ago, and notices at a meeting that the men are looking over at her wrist and seeing this thing, and
say, hey, she knows.
She knows what she's doing. Yeah.
Thanks to you. So it's a very mutual relationship.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah. So it worked out great.
Going back to that question about style, and watches, do you feel that you have to pair certain watches with certain, clothing styles? Tuxedo watch with a tuxedo, dress watch with a suit.
Yeah, I have almost no rules about that.
Okay.
little bit like pairing wines with food. You want you want a big white with a steak, that's fine. You want a red with a piece of fish, it's actually okay. Yeah, very few rules. I'd say when I wear my tux, I'm probably wearing my CP Cartier tank. That's just kind of become a pattern for me. But this piece is a great example. I can wear this with my tux. I can wear this with jeans and a hoodie, and it looks fabulous. It's so versatile.
It really is. It's a classic. You know, that's an original, you know, CP throwback to, you know, one of the most iconic Cartier designs ever.
Tank Louis, you know, one of 200. I think they probably made about 230 of these. Yeah, really fortunate. Found it online, just in the right place at the right time.
So, and then of course, you know, you're wearing your other Cartier Tank Normal with.
Yeah. So right. So here's kind of an interesting dichotomy, right? A very kind of 70s, almost, you know, maybe even earlier Art Deco look with a kind of a crazy bomber jacket. But
now this would have certainly been worn with like a beautiful, I can see it in an amazing double-breasted, you know, suit coat with a tie, a nice white shirt, and you're rocking it today with the.
It's 2024. I think you know, the contrast works.
See, you heard it here. No more rules.
No more. Yeah.
Wear what you love.
Very few rules.
That's right. Wear what you love. Your advice would be like wear what you love, and you know, don't be afraid to pair, you know, dress watches with something a little different.
Yep. And you know, although if you read the watch press, they might tell you that, you know, James Bond had it wrong and you really shouldn't wear your Submariner with your tux, but I think you're allowed to.
Right. Well, you know, there's certainly no stopping people today from wearing stainless steel sport watches with you know, suit and ties, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you all for tuning in to watch our most recent Collector to Collector here at the Shreve Crumpelo YouTube channel. We hope to see you again on the next one. And if you have a collection that you feel that you'd like to have featured on the channel, please don't hesitate to reach out to sales@shrevecrumpelo.com. Thank you.